I'm Andy MacNeil, host of the Puck Portfolio, Canada Sports Betting's new podcast where I provide projections, betting advice, strategies, and pick the brains of some smart hockey people from around the NHL every weekday at 12:30 p.m. Eastern Time on the Canada Sports Betting YouTube channel and wherever you get your podcast. My guest today is a bettor that most years probably only has to hit about 2% of his future wagers to make a profit. Michael Leboff from the Action Network's Line Change Hockey Podcast. Welcome to the show, Michael. Thanks for joining me. How are you doing?
Good. This is this is the best time of year to be punting on hockey, and because I think when we're talking these futures and these long shot futures, it's so much pencil and paper handicapping, and it's like trying to break down a horse race more than anything. So that's why I love it so much, and why I end up on some futures that I think a lot of people don't see coming.
Yeah, I definitely think it's an area where a diehard hockey fan that might not be a seasoned sports bettor can maybe really use their brain to find some value in these markets. So let's start in the Eastern Conference. I think you've got maybe a handful of player futures. Player futures are something that I have not been able to spend a lot of time on this year. I've been so busy with the projection models that I've kind of let this slide this season. So I'm hoping to get down on maybe a handful of player futures before the puck drops here on the season. But I know there will be plenty of opportunities to get down on things like player awards and things like that throughout the season. But where are you looking at in the Eastern Conference for some value?
Yeah, I guess we'll start with the Hart, since that's kind of the headliner award to win MVP. Connor McDavid, of course, he's odds on at some sports books to win. I don't think that anyone will argue that he's probably around 50% to win if he stays healthy and puts up the numbers that we're kind of accustomed to him putting up. It's going to be his word going away, and I will just tip my cap and let him beat me once again, because I'm not going to just take my money and put it into a Connor McDavid CD. I'd much rather have some fun with these kind of things. And uh, I landed on a bet on, and yeah, I'm an Islander fan, so I'll come out and say that right away. But I landed on Ilya Sorokin to win the Hart. He is 170 to 1 around the market. So this is my line of thinking here. When I was talking about pencil and paper handicapping, this is a market that I like to bet goalies in, because when you look back at the history of this award in the last 20 or so years, we do get a goalie every once in a while, once a decade since 2000. If you go back to like 1995, we've seen 4. Dominik Hasek won it twice, Jose Theodore, and then Carey Price in 2015. So it's not out of the question. Goalies have won it more regularly than defensemen. Now, my line of thinking with Sorokin is he's the favorite to win the Vezina. He's lukewarm, like plus 500, but he is the consensus favorite. I think most people, when the mainstream media places start to put out their picks for awards, he's going to be the guy that gets probably garners the most picks ahead of goalies like Igor Shesterkin or Yu Saros or Connor Hellebuck. So if he's good enough to be the favorite to win the Vezina, amongst a really quality group of goalies, Shesterkin is elite, Saros is elite, Hellebuck is elite. Even guys like beating out Thatcher Demko. You go down the list. If you're good enough to be a favorite amongst his cohort of goalies, the number's just way too long in the Hart Trophy. And I like that he's a goalie too compared to McDavid, because let's say McDavid posts 125 points. It's pretty easy to take that number and compare it to, let's say, Austin Matthews scores 50 and has 110 points. You say, oh, well, McDavid, objectively is the MVP because he's got more points. Whereas if McDavid has an outstanding year, and so does Sorokin, it's a lot harder to kind of be like, apples and oranges a little bit here. And Sorokin also plays for a team that's on the fringe of the playoff picture, which is another thing I like when I'm betting Hart Trophy and other player futures, is because you can kind of build a narrative that he dragged them to the playoffs. He was their most valuable player. So there's a lot of things pointing to Sorokin, and the number's so big out there. I think you can also take this logic and apply it to someone like Connor Hellebuck.
Looking at the Vezina Trophy odds, I mean, I don't believe that Ilya Sorokin should be the favorite, and that he is, I think, the best goalie in the group, or at least one or two. But looking at the Islanders' playoff chances, I mean, if they don't make the playoffs, which I guess is a realistic possibility, but in terms of Saros and Sorokin, I think it's a little bit wrong for either of them to be at the top of the board because if their teams don't make the playoffs, these guys aren't going to be in the running, whether they deserve to or not. Because look, it's an award that is voted on by the general managers. I mentioned it on the first episode of the Puck Portfolio that I think some of these general managers even go as far as to just delegate this and give it to somebody on their staff and say, here, put three picks in, right? Like it's not a big priority for these guys, so they're not pulling out, their analytics team to help them make this decision. So I think that you're going to get some lazy votes, and in terms of how black and white some of these hockey men are when it comes to was a season successful or not? Did the team make the playoffs or did they? Right? I mean, a team can make the playoffs on the last day of the regular season. It'll save everybody's job. It's pretty silly, right? So same goes for awards. It can be pretty silly sometimes how these things get decided, and even a guy like Sorokin who could potentially be the most deserving goaltender in the league for the Vezina Trophy might get shunned. I like going big or going home in this instance with this player for sure.
Yep. So that's my lone Hart Trophy. Like I said, it's going to be so hard to beat McDavid. So I don't
Might
really
as
want to
well
get
go for it.
yeah, and I don't want to get too you know pick six different guys and try to beat him with them, and then come up empty when McDavid runs away with it. So we'll move on to what I have as my favorite bet right now, which is Mikhail Sergachev to win the Norris Trophy at 100 to 1. So Kale McCarr is the clear favorite here. He's not odds on, but he's plus 160, as low as one of the lowest numbers I've seen out there. Then there's a little bit of a jump to the Adam Foxes, Rasmus Dahlin's, Miro Haskinens of the world. And then there's another jump to like Charlie McAvoy's and Quinn Hughes. And I started to scroll looking for Sergachev because I thought he'd probably be in the 40s or 50s. And when I saw him at 100 to 1, I was shocked because Victor Hedman is like 30 to 1, and I get that this and a lot of awards are based on reputation, and as human beings, like you said, are voting on these awards, and reputation ends up playing such a huge role in it. Um, but Victor Hedman isn't the number one defenseman in Tampa Bay anymore, so Mikhail Sergachev is, and Victor Hedman doesn't run the power play anymore. Mikhail Sergachev does. So Sergachev went from 38 points to 63, 64 last year, so he's already taken a nice jump, and he could probably take another, a bigger jump as he's now accustomed to having that number one workload. He runs the power play, and it's such a good power play with Kucherov, Point, and Stamkos that uh, Sergachev has a chance to take another leap here to go to like point per game. So at 100 to 1 for a guy who's going to run one of what should project to be one of the league's best uh, power plays, in my book is a great number. Now, you could kind of quibble that the Andre Vasilevsky injury hurts his chances here because the Lightning will probably let up more goals than uh,
You could
we're
argue
used
that
to
it
seeing.
helps his chances as
That's
well,
the
though,
point, right?
because I think he could stand out more because
Exactly.
Vasilevsky takes a lot of the spotlight away from some of these players. So yeah,
Perfect.
no, totally agree with you there. It's the thing that I really have a hard time with some of these real long shots with the player awards. Talked to Greg Wyshynski on the podcast on Wednesday about this, and he talked about how not only are things like voter fatigue, but there's that element of it's this guy's year, and has Sergachev got to that point yet? Right, like, and that's what I worry about with bets like this. I totally agree with you that he is the best defenseman on the Lightning, but like you said, the people that are voting on these awards aren't maybe necessarily as up on things as they should be sometimes. So it takes some time, and of course, usually when the time comes, the odds have already caught up
Right.
quite a bit. So it's been frustrating because I've had some really what I felt were really kind of ahead of the curve opinions on some players in the futures market here these past number of years, and it just seems like they get close, but just don't quite get there, especially when it comes to the awards.
Yeah. No, I'm with you, and I think that is part of the reason why these guys are long shots too is like nobody's going to be coming into the season talking about Mikhail Sergachev because frankly, he just wasn't talked about last year by this group of people that make these decisions, and it's so reputation based that's why we're finding him at 100 to 1 rather than where I think his true number should probably be like closer to 50 if you're just looking at like
Yeah,
his opportunity. So he's still a realistic long shot, but he shouldn't be 100 to 1
for
at all.
sure.
We'll stay in the East. I do have another Norris pick, but we'll get to that when we kind of roll through the West. Historically, my best market in betting player futures is not even betting players; it's betting coaches. And the one I think I've had the most trouble with has been the Vezina, and that's because I think one of my biggest bet regrets ever was not betting Shesterkin. I thought that he was 20 to 1 the year he won, and I spent basically the entire summer thinking I'm going to get a better number than this. At some point, like when more books posted or whatever, for some reason 20 to 1 wasn't good enough for me. Um,
Because you're
and I think
usually betting 75 and
right,
100 to 1.
exactly, right, yeah. So I'm sitting, I'm sitting a couple. I'm in the gods, right? I'm in the nosebleeds at hockey games anyway. So and I do that with my betting, and even when a long shot like Linus Ullmark wins, it's just so hard to pick the right one. So this year, I'm trying to kind of stay in that Ullmark lane, and I'm trying to circle the long shot that I think has the best opportunity just to rack up wins, and maybe be on a team that wins the President's Trophy and plays enough games that and wins enough games that it's almost hard to give it. Maybe someone like Shesterkin or Sorokin puts up the better save percentage or shutout numbers or goals saved above expected. But if this guy gets to the 50 win plateau or something, it's really hard for the people who vote on this award, which are broadcasters for the Vezina. No, the broadcasters vote on Jack
General
Adams.
managers.
Yeah, general managers vote on the
Yeah.
Vezina to look away from the wins. So that's why I like Vitek Vanacek. He's 175 to 1.
Going to have his opportunity to rack up some wins, like you said, if
Exactly.
Akira Smith doesn't steal that #1 job from him right
Correct.
away out of the gate.
That's my thinking. It's a little bit of it's like a parlay. You think of it being okay. He's got to beat Schmid for the starting gig over the 82 game season. Kind of hit like the 55 start plateau, maybe 60 if we're like really lucky in this market. But
Allmark proved last season. I mean, he had Swayman, a really good running mate, and you could argue that Swayman was better than Allmark down the stretch, and that didn't persuade anybody from voting for Allmark. So I don't think the even if he ends up sharing some of the sharing the net with Kira Smith, if he takes the larger part of the load, I think you might be in a good spot here.
yeah, that's the point, and it's 175 to 1. So it's not like I'm laying like the short price here. So that's my thinking. And the last future I'll talk about in the Eastern Conference, and this is one that was I was kind of directed to by my co-host on Line Change, Nick Martin. Uh, Steven Stamkos is 100 to 1 to lead the Atlantic Division in goals. So we get to take away the Oilers out of the equation, take away McKinnon and Rantanen, and this number is still out there at 100 to 1. And I know you're still going up against Austin Matthews and some other stellar players there, Tage
David
Thompson,
Pastrnak.
Pasternak. Yeah, like it's a tough group to beat, but at 100 to 1 on Stamkos in this weird contract year for him, I'll take a shot. And once again, another guy who's going to be on. He's going to be the trigger man on one of the best power plays in the league. So
If you talk to any of the old men in my dad's hockey pool, they will preach about contract years. So maybe you're onto something. I know they would agree, but yeah, like I mean Stamkos, he's gonna have a bit of a chip on his shoulder for sure, and I'm gonna cheer for you. I like Steven Stamkos.
all right, so we'll shift to the West now. So I said that Sergachev is my favorite number that's still out there. My favorite bet that I made this offseason was Andre Turigny to win the Jack Adams. He was
And
100 to 1.
that's not still out there, right?
Yeah, it's not. Yeah, he's down to 66 though.
Yeah, still good.
So yeah, it's still a good number. Like
Yeah.
the Coyotes are. I've seen them as low as plus 480 to make the playoffs. If the Arizona Coyotes make the playoffs and Andre Turigny doesn't win the Jack Adams,
Burn it down.
burn it down. I don't care if the Bruins do it again. Like if the Bruins go nuclear again and the Coyotes make the playoffs, you need to give this guy the Jack Adams if he gets his team to the playoffs in that building with all the I'm sorry for swearing, all the shit that's piled up on this organization and so long, like
Yeah.
throughout. he deserves it, right? Like this is a bona fide, I think, a very correlated bet. If you think the Arizona Coyotes, you're going to hear over the next week or so as we're in season preview mode, who's your dark horse, who's your sleeper, who's your playoff sleeper. So many people are going to pick the Arizona Coyotes. If you're one of those people,
Do you think they are though? Do you think so many people are going to pick them? Do you
I'm
think that
hearing it
many
a
people are
lot.
wise to the
I'm
Coyotes?
I'm hearing it a lot more than I thought I would.
Yeah, you're telling everybody. That's why.
That's okay. I'd much rather have a nice little bandwagon here, than win a bet on my own. And the only person that could that pats me on the back would be myself. I'd much rather have my
Barry
arms around
Horowitz,
folks.
baby.
Yeah, yeah. But I think that this bet is correlated. I also want to say, and I know he's in the East, but the one other coach that I would consider, and this is a lot shorter than player futures that I like to bet, would be Cooper, because he's never won it, and the Vasilevsky
Yeah,
thing now
that's
changes.
insane.
Yeah, and it changes the equation now, right? The Vasilevsky thing. If he gets this team to the playoffs, all of a sudden Cooper, he doesn't need to have a 100-point season to qualify for this award. But yeah, I would say that Cooper now becomes pretty live in this market with the Vasilevsky thing. So that's another one I would keep in mind.
Where's he at right now?
He's in the 20s.
That's yeah, okay. Yeah. I mean, if they can overcome this 8 to 10 week stretch here without Vasilevsky, and I mean if they can really overcome it and like
Right.
act as if it never even happened, uh, I bet those odds will be a lot shorter in 2 months time in mid
Exactly.
December, right? So yeah, I think I like that a lot, Michael. So I'm gonna consider that one for sure.
Um, and then we'll stay out west, your neck of the woods. Evan Bouchard. This is another one I bet early. Number's still good
Boosh.
though. It was 66, it's now 50. Still good. And in a similar vein to that Sergachev argument, here's a guy who's going to run a historically good power play. Like,
Yeah,
he could sleepwalk. He could have a terrible Evan Bouchard, by like play driving metrics, could have a bad season
yeah.
and still win the Norris Trophy because he just might
It's
walk into 90 points.
it's I mean, I was really blown away by how many people failed to pick up on him and how like little he was being talked about. I think it's picked up as the summer has gone on and
Yep.
like has we've gotten closer to the season, more people. And I know when ESPN put out their projected points, or people kind of lost their minds because Bouchard was projected pretty low, but like this guy had the same amount, almost to the second, of power play time as McDavid in the playoffs. And, he's going to be pretty much stitched to McDavid's hip in a lot of ways. It's just a great opportunity for this kid, and he's got a booming shot. I really like him for
Yeah, he's
sure.
in a great spot. And this is hockey. Like, you're in Canada, so it's a little different. But here in the States, the sports books just don't really pay attention to hockey as much as they do to the bigger sports. And I think that one of the reasons why Bouchard is still out there, um, at a big number, like I said, he has taken some money, but not nearly enough, is just because the the algorithms are looking at, okay, he had 42 points last year or whatever it was,
Yeah, he
and
didn't take over until
yeah,
mid-season
exactly.
when they traded Tyson Berry away.
Yep.
And if you look at what happened after that, I mean, yeah, it's
He was point per
uh,
game, and then he was better than
yeah.
point per game in the playoffs. And so this is a guy who could go from like 42 to 100 points.
The
Uh,
Oilers are my pick to win the President's Trophy too, and I think, like, I mean, when I say my pick, they're my bet, and they have the best odds in the NHL, in my opinion, because their odds match right up with that of the Carolina Hurricanes at around 18%, according to my projection model, and that has everything to do, not everything, but a lot to do with the fact that the Western Conference is weaker. And you look, and Carolina is plus 650 to win the President's Trophy, and the Oilers are 9-1. So I like the Oilers to win the President's Trophy, and I think they're just going to crush this regular season.
I'm glad you brought that up because another bet that I've kind of been. I didn't once again. I don't deserve any credit for landing in this spot, but this was from Tim Kalinowski, who also comes on Line Changers. He was talking about Jack Campbell as a Vezina Trophy long shot at 150, and it's the same thing as Vanacek, right? Like, we know that Jack Campbell is not an elite goalie; he's not one of the best goalies in the league, but this Oilers team has potential to run away with the President's Trophy. I think is the best way to put it, right? Like, the Hurricanes might win it, but if the Hurricanes win the President's Trophy, they're probably going to edge it, right? They'll win it
Yeah,
by a point or two. The Oilers have a chance to just put everybody away. And if they do that, we could look at another Olmark situation with Campbell. So I don't think that 150 to 1 is terrible there.
Yeah, this could be a year. I mean, if the Oilers can reach their potential and they can hit all season long the way they did in the second half of last season, it could be a year where you see Edmonton bring home just all the hardware, the Rocket, the Hart, the Vesna, the Norris, etc. Like there could be a lot of hard. Like, teams have done it before,
Yep.
right? So I think the Oilers have the makeup of that kind of team where they could just win everything in one season, and I could see it happening this year for sure.
Yeah, and that's it for me in terms of player futures. I took a look at the Selkie market. First time I've ever seen that get posted.
I haven't looked around a whole lot, but was talking to Wyszynski. Like I said, he brought up Nico Hischier. Just seems like a guy that's just trending towards the Selkie Trophy win, and I would agree with that. But he's the betting favorite at the one book that I see has Selkie odds up right now. Is it just one shop that's offering this? I haven't seen it offered
It's
anywhere else yet.
I think it's two. But and he sure is the favorite. And the only number that was semi interesting to me was Crosby at 28 to 1.
My first reaction to seeing the odds at the one sports book that I looked at these are pretty sharp looking. They
Yeah,
don't look like there's a whole lot. I mean, Marner, Nico Hischier, I forget who else, but
Barkov.
the guys
I
that you would expect to be right at the top of the board, kind of
Yeah.
exactly where you would expect them to be, were there, and I just kept scrolling after that.
The thing that told me right away that the numbers were sharp and there was nothing to really get involved in was the first name I was looking for was Elias Pettersson, because I don't think
Yeah,
he gets enough credit as a two-way
you're
player,
right.
and he was fourth favorite. So I was like, I thought we were gonna get him at like 30 to 1. I was like, maybe they
Yeah.
don't know he's Swedish, kind of known as a offensive player, and I went to the bottom of the board. I'm like, oh, he's not even listed. I'm gonna have to request him, and then I scroll back to the top, and I'm like, oh, they're onto it. But yeah, that's it. I did the Stanley Cup futures I played are both in the East. I like the Islanders. Like I'm not
You
gonna.
bet the Islanders every year, though?
I
Is
do.
this
Yeah. So
something
I'm.
every
It's not.
single year you bet the Islanders?
Yeah, I do. And that's not one
Okay.
that I'm gonna say like, oh, this is a you know bona fide great bet. But I do think that like they are.
They can get in, and
Yeah,
yeah,
exactly. They're
and
you
Sorokin. I mean,
right.
yeah. No,
They're
I hear
they're
you.
they're definitely a rabble rouser if they get in. So I'll do it, and I'll do it every year. But the one other one I liked was Ottawa at 75 to 1. The more and more I think about it, the more and more I think that Ottawa is actually live to win the Atlantic Division, um, especially with the Vasilevsky news. Uh, I don't expect Florida and Tampa to be shoo-ins to make the playoffs, and so right away I think Ottawa has a chance to beat those two teams. Maybe I'm crazy. I think that the Leafs are actually on much thinner ice than most people do, considering the margin for error now is much lower with the bottom six and the defense. So that's the thing. And then the Bruins, like anybody's guess. Yeah, and I'll be able to say something that I said last year that turned out to be maybe my worst hypothesis, and I've had some really bad ones. Uh, the Bruins were 28 to 1 to win the Stanley Cup,
Yeah.
and whatever they were to win the President's Trophy. And my thinking on the Bruins was this team's going to start slow. They've got a lot of injuries to deal with. We'll be able to get a much better number than these later in the season. But I really like this team. Like I had them as my second best betting value when I was putting out those power rankings back in the day, in going into the new season. And I said pump the brakes here. Like we're gonna the bookmakers won't see us coming when the Bruins start slow. We get them at 50 to 1 and they win the Stanley Cup. So,
That never
but
happened.
I do think that once again is probably what I'm gonna do here is because like there's 16ish to win the Stanley Cup now, and you'll probably be able to get that number for all season
It's
because
not
I don't
going
they're
anywhere.
not gonna they're
Yeah.
not going anywhere, right? Like they're not gonna charge out of the gates, and it's only going in one direction is the better way to look at it. I think everybody looks at the Bruins because of what we just saw out of them, and so they're comparing them to last season. When what did we just say about the Islanders, right? Like if this team gets in, they're going to be trouble. And if the Bruins get
Yeah,
into the playoffs, like they're so good defensively and they should have good goaltending, that they'd be an issue. And if they do find that number one center, and hell, maybe it is. I think there's just as much chance that it's Pavel Zacha as it is that
I
Don
hope so.
Sweeney's brings in a but it like what's more likely, like Zacha is a good number one center, or they go out and get a good number one center. I think the likelihood is probably the same. That
Absolutely, yeah.
right? So yeah, I wouldn't hate the Bruins at all if this number drifts and gets a little higher, but it's 16 to 1. You're putting them in with like Dallas and some other teams
Dallas, who
that
I
are
think actually should be a shorter shot to win the Stanley Cup than 16 to 1. I think you look in the West. I think they're on par with the Avalanche in terms of skill level and stuff.
yep.
I think they might even be better than them. I have them projected 1 point or a little more than 1 point ahead of them to win the Central Division, and I think the Stars are actually one of the only, like, as far as what my projection model says, the Stars are one of the only value bets in the Stanley Cup market, and they're the only Stanley Cup bet that I've made so far, based on my projections, because I think that it's typically one of the worst markets to bet
It
into at
is,
this
yeah.
point in the season. So it's usually the last thing I'm looking at when I'm betting, when I'm talking about preseason predictions, because I'd rather bet into the division, the President's Trophy, and sometimes the conference, but rarely am I looking at the Stanley Cup, as I think there are better ways to use your futures bankroll.
Yeah, I'm with you. I think that for me, it's much more about entertainment value than anything, and then but I also like to start there, and I can
Yeah.
kind of figure out my where I want to go next. So like
Like
with
Pasternak gave me a ton of entertainment value last year. I thought he might even catch McDavid. I had him 20 to 1 to win
uh,
the Rocket Richard, and it turns out he's the only one that could even come remotely close to catching Connor McDavid last year, and he still couldn't even really get close. So,
it's
I mean,
unbelievable. Yeah,
there's entertainment, and then there's like a ton of frustration
yeah.
after all that
Oh yeah, it's all
entertainment.
about the pain. Hockey betting on hockey is you're in it for the pain, and anyone who tells you otherwise is just lying to you, man. Like just wait until we get Andre Tourigny as the Coyotes get into the playoffs and Tourigny's
Runner
on the
up.
ballot, and they just do something stupid like give it a Rod Brendamore or something again. Yeah, that's it for me. I think the Calder Trophy. Like come on, like I'm not getting involved there. I think they could just
Yeah.
give it to Bernard now. The media's so obsessed with the guy. It's going to take something super supernatural, and
Maybe
I'm not
voter
going to bet an odds-on favorite in the freaking Calder Trophy market
No,
either.
and maybe voter fatigue will go into effect before the season even
Yeah,
starts, and
right.
and
We
they're
could.
looking for a reason to bet against Bedard,
Right.
just because they're so sick of hearing about him. But I think he's going to wow people quite a bit with that shot. So it's going to be tough, and I mean, I'll take an opportunity on a player if it comes along, but it's not necessarily this sort of thing I'm going to waste a whole lot of time trying to like outthink the hockey world on who's going to beat out Bedard for
Right.
the Calder Trophy. It doesn't make a lot of sense to spend my time doing that, to be honest.
Yeah. No, I'm with you 100%. I was happy to. Why bet Connor Bedard when you can bet Vitek Vanacek?
All right, man. Thanks a lot for joining me on the Puck Portfolio today. I'll look forward to joining you on Line Change, the Action Network podcast, next week to do a bit of a futures recap. So everybody should go check out Line Change and subscribe to their channel so you can see when I show up. Otherwise, why would you watch it, right? Michael and Nick Martin provide a lot of great hockey content throughout the season over at the Action Network. So definitely check them out and give both of them a follow.
Yeah. Thanks for having me, and I'm excited to see where this goes, man. This is gonna be a lot of fun to watch.